Breaking news. King Charles has just publicly rebuked Keir Starmer with a single powerful statement. The Prime Minister appeared visibly shaken. Palace sources confirm Charles invoked his constitutional authority to admonish Starmer in front of dozens of Commonwealth leaders. Senior Whitehall officials are reportedly in full panic mode. 3 cabinet ministers have already cleared their schedules, and what happened next has thrown Parliament into complete disarray. This marks the most serious royal intervention since 1962. Britain is now facing a constitutional crisis that could disrupt 300 years of delicate balance between Crown and Parliament. It all began 48 hours ago at the Commonwealth Leaders Summit. Tension in the air was palpable. King Charles arrived at Westminster Hall precisely at 10:42 a.m., flanked by his most trusted advisors. His demeanor was notably cold, his posture rigid. Royal observers immediately sensed something was amiss. He passed the ceremonial guard without his usual smile. The king's private secretary appeared unusually solemn. Charles adjusted his tie twice, a nervous tic he only exhibits under extreme stress. Observers noted he barely acknowledged the Prime Minister, offering only a slight nod. Starmer looked visibly uneasy, shuffling papers nervously and whispering urgently to his aide, Emma Payne. His water glass remained untouched, but no one could have predicted what came next. The king departed from the pre-approved script entirely. Royal protocol requires all speeches to be vetted by Downing Street, a practice in place since Queen Victoria's reign. Charles, however, had other plans. His words sent shockwaves through the hall. In times of national uncertainty, leadership demands both wisdom and humility. Some in positions of power appear to have forgotten their obligations to the people they serve. Cameras captured Starmer's face turn ashen. His right hand gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles whitened. Charles pressed on with even greater intensity. When elected officials place ideological experiments above the welfare of ordinary British citizens, they risk eroding the very foundations that have supported our nation for centuries. Then came the most devastating line: I cannot and will not remain silent when the most vulnerable in our society are forgotten. The room fell utterly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Foreign Secretary David Lammy froze mid-sentence as he scribbled notes. Diplomatic representatives from 54 Commonwealth nations looked on in stunned disbelief. The Australian Prime Minister visibly gasped. Sources close to the Prime Minister described him as trembling and struggling to maintain composure. Within minutes, emergency calls flooded number 10. Cabinet ministers scrambled to prepare a response. The government's communications director was seen rushing into Downing Street at 12:23 p.m., looking visibly alarmed. 3 unmarked vehicles carrying security personnel arrived shortly after. Former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak described it as the most extraordinary royal intervention in modern British history. Security camera footage shows Starmer leaving via a side entrance, refusing to answer any questions. Meanwhile, ordinary British pensioners who served their country are struggling to keep warm. Margaret Williams, an 83-year-old widow from Yorkshire, cannot afford to heat more than one room of her home. Her energy bills have tripled in just 18 months. I wrap myself in blankets and go to bed at 7 p.m. because I can't bear the cold, she said, her voice trembling. I worked all my life, paid my taxes, and now I feel abandoned. Her pension barely covers basic necessities, and she skips meals 3 days a week. Veterans who served in Afghanistan are now sleeping rough on the streets of Manchester and Birmingham. The Royal British Legion reports a 37% rise in homelessness among former service members. James Cooper, who completed 3 tours in Helmand Province, now sleeps in a tent under Waterloo Bridge. I feel betrayed, he said, showing the medals he still keeps in his backpack. Yet Starmer's government recently approved $4.7 billion in foreign aid to countries with questionable human rights records. Last week, $230 million was allocated to climate initiatives in nations that continue to build coal-fired power stations. While elderly Britons are forced to choose between heating and eating, ministers are enjoying lavish taxpayer-funded dinners at 5-star London hotels. Reports cite 290 bottles of champagne and 175 lobster dinners. Civil servants were spotted at the Savoy's American Bar, racking up $1,200 bar tabs. Leaked receipts last week revealed over $83,000 spent on diplomatic entertainment in a single month. The Environment Secretary was photographed arriving at Claridge's in a government Jaguar, while pensioners queued at food banks in his constituency. The contrast is so stark, so utterly shameful, that even traditional Labour supporters are voicing their disgust. Brian Thompson, a lifelong Labor voter and former union representative, told reporters, "I've supported Labor since 1968, but I don't recognize this party anymore. They've forgotten the working people they were created to represent." In Barnsley, a former mining town and Labor stronghold, locals have launched a petition demanding Starmer visit and see what real life is like. Over 7,400 signatures have been collected so far, yet Downing Street has not responded. Then, something unprecedented occurred that nobody anticipated. King Charles III broke nearly a century of royal precedent with his actions following the confrontation at Buckingham Palace, just hours after the Westminster incident. Charles convened an emergency meeting of the Privy Council, the ancient body of advisors to the monarch that has existed since the Norman conquest. Senior royal correspondents confirmed this was the first such emergency session called by a monarch since George VI during the darkest days of World War II. Charles appeared solemn but resolute as he entered the Privy Council chamber at 7:15 p.m., wearing no ceremonial robes, just a simple dark suit. It was a clear signal this was business, not pageantry. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours, twice the scheduled time. Members emerged looking visibly shaken. His Majesty's concern for the welfare of his subjects transcends political considerations, declared a senior palace official, his voice brimming with emotion. The king has expressed deep disappointment that fundamental British values appear to be eroding under the current government. The official's hands trembled slightly as he read the statement. Palace insiders revealed Charles personally reviewed evidence of government misspending before deciding to speak out. He reportedly spent 5 hours scrutinizing budget allocations with his personal financial advisors. Documents show the king had received over 7,000 letters from struggling pensioners describing their hardships under current policies. Charles is said to have read dozens personally, often staying up until 2 a.m. on multiple occasions. One letter from a 91-year-old D-Day veteran particularly moved him. Constitutional experts confirm the king acted fully within his rights as sovereign. Professor Elizabeth Harrington of Oxford University noted that the monarch's authority to advise and caution elected officials dates back to Magna Carta. The optics are disastrous for Starmer's already fragile leadership. Former speechwriters describe it as the political equivalent of being summoned to the headmaster's office. The consequences were immediate and far-reaching. The pound fell 3.7% against the dollar within hours of the king's intervention. Currency traders described trading floors as chaotic. Emergency calls between global finance ministers began at 3 a.m. London time. The FTSE 100 dropped 290 points, erasing nearly $27 billion from Britain's largest companies. Investment firms issued unprecedented warnings to clients about political instability. Inside Parliament, Labour MPs are openly questioning Starmer's leadership. 34 backbenchers have signed a letter calling for an emergency party meeting. 6 junior ministers have offered their resignations. Shadow ministers are reportedly drawing up contingency plans for a leadership contest. The opposition is circling, sensing blood in the water. Conservative leader Penny Mordaunt announced she is considering a no-confidence vote, declaring that the Prime Minister has lost not only the confidence of Parliament, but also that of the monarch. Her press conference drew record viewership. International reactions have been equally severe. President Trump described the situation as a complete disaster for Britain. European leaders voiced serious concerns about political stability in the UK. The French president reportedly cancelled a scheduled call with Starmer. German newspapers are running front-page analyses of Britain's royal crisis. The hashtag King Charles trended globally for 19 consecutive hours, generating over 8.4 million tweets. Social media erupted with memes depicting Charles in medieval armor defending Britain. Public demonstrations have broken out in 27 cities across the country. In Manchester, over 14,000 protesters filled Albert Square, chanting "Stand with the King." Edinburgh saw 9,000 gather outside the city's civic centre. But there is an even more troubling development making matters worse. Inside number 10 Downing Street, chaos reigns supreme. Ministers are shouting at one another behind closed doors. Security staff report hearing explosive arguments from the cabinet room. 3 senior advisors have not left the building in 36 hours. Emergency meetings stretch through the night, with takeaway containers piling up outside conference rooms. Senior staff described the atmosphere as completely toxic, verging on hysteria. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner allegedly threw a binder across the room during a particularly heated exchange, striking a portrait of former PM Tony Blair. The glass shattered, a metaphor too perfect to ignore. Chancellor Rachel Reeves was overheard saying, "This is a complete disaster of Starmer's own making. He's dragging us all down with him." WhatsApp groups with names such as damage control and leadership options are buzzing with plots and counterplots. Message volume has surged 7 to 80% since the crisis began. The question is not if they will abandon Starmer, but when. Betting markets give him less than a week. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper looked visibly distressed as she left. Number 10 at 11:45 p.m., sources say she has already spoken with party officials about succession options and secured pledges of support from at least 47 MPs. Starmer's closest allies are abandoning ship. His communications director has taken personal leave, widely interpreted as stepping away from a sinking vessel. His chief of staff has not been seen in public for 24 hours. 3 scheduled media appearances were abruptly cancelled. Palace officials report that the king has already prepared for the possibility of a new prime minister within days. Royal household staff confirmed that the kissing hands ceremony room has been readied, the constitutional ritual for appointing a new PM. But it gets even more shocking. A bombshell revelation could permanently end Starmer's career. Leaked documents from within Downing Street indicate that Starmer's team had deliberately planned to undermine the monarchy months ago. A 17-page strategy memo titled Modernizing Britain's Institutions explicitly outlines a campaign to gradually reduce royal influence. The document, dated 12th of March, contains detailed phases, including controlled confrontation and public opinion management. If authentic and accurate, as senior sources claim, then Starmer was not merely responding to the king, he was executing a calculated plan to diminish the crown's standing. The memo allegedly passed through the hands of 7 senior ministers, each signing off on the strategy. Consider the implications. The Prime Minister potentially plotting against one of Britain's most sacred institutions, deliberately undermining 1,000 years of constitutional history. The memo reportedly contains direct quotes from Starmer, referring to royal tradition as outdated pageantry and suggesting the monarchy should be ceremonial only, with no actual influence. It reportedly recommends staged confrontations to gauge public reaction. Page 11 specifically mentions restricting royal access to government papers, a right monarchs have held since Parliament's earliest days. The optics of such measures would be devastating. Former MI5 officials have described it as constitutional sabotage. 2 prominent constitutional lawyers are already examining potential breaches of the ministerial code. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is positioning himself as a staunch defender of British tradition. While Starmer struggles to contain the fallout, Farage is holding large rallies across the UK. In Birmingham yesterday, over 15,000 people gathered to hear him speak. The crowd stretched across 6 city blocks, with many carrying Union Jacks and portraits of the king. When a government turns against its own people and its own traditions, it forfeits its right to govern, Farage declared to thunderous applause that lasted nearly 2 minutes. His Reform UK party has gained 11 percentage points in just 4 days. Campaign donations have surged 840% since the crisis began. Former Labour strongholds are shifting to Reform UK in unprecedented numbers. The polls tell the story. Labour has collapsed from 38% to just 24%. Conservative support remains steady at 31%, while Reform UK has surged to 29%. For the first time in decades, a third party is seriously challenging the traditional 2-party system. Reform UK is not merely gaining supporters, it is emerging as a legitimate contender for government. Farage appears on every major news program looking calm and statesmanlike, while Starmer avoids the cameras. His social media engagement has tripled overnight. Former Labour voters are flocking to Reform UK in record numbers. In Hartley, a traditional Labour seat, local party membership has fallen 38%, while Reform membership has grown 217%. The next 72 hours are critical. Constitutional experts warn a government collapse could be imminent, with the possibility of a no-confidence vote or even an emergency general election. Senior judges are reportedly reviewing legal precedents for a constitutional crisis. The pound could fall further, risking a wider economic downturn. 2 major investment banks have already issued warnings about UK political instability. International investors are beginning to withdraw from UK markets. Britain's special relationship with the United States is now at stake. 3 scheduled diplomatic visits have been postponed indefinitely. The question is no longer whether Starmer can survive this crisis. It is now a question of whether Britain's entire political system can withstand the shockwaves. Military leaders have increased security around key institutions, a precaution not seen since the 2011 riots. The nation is witnessing its political foundations fracture in real time. This crisis will be studied for decades as the moment when the delicate balance between monarchy and elected government came perilously close to collapse. At its epicenter stands Starmer, appearing increasingly isolated, desperate, and completely out of his depth. His last public appearance lasted just 47 seconds before he was hurried away by security. Palace sources indicate the king is ready to take further unprecedented measures if the situation worsens. Royal historians describe this as the most serious constitutional standoff since the abdication crisis of 1936. Constitutional experts from 5 major universities have formed an emergency advisory group, unprecedented in peacetime. So here is the question that matters. Did King Charles just end Starmer's political career? Has the Prime Minister committed the greatest miscalculation in modern British politics? Or has he inadvertently sparked a new political movement that could reshape Britain's future? Could the king be forced to call an emergency election? And is it possible that Nigel Farage could become Britain's next Prime Minister? Could this mark the end of Labour as we know it? We want to hear your thoughts. Share your views in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story has shocked you as much as it has shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to see what is really happening in Westminster right now. The mainstream media may not tell the full story, but we will. Tomorrow, we will bring exclusive interviews with insiders who claim this crisis runs far deeper than anyone realizes. Sources indicate there may be evidence of foreign interference in this constitutional standoff. Subscribe now so you don't miss this breaking development.